Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining ICE's panel discussion on Uttar Pradesh Assembly election, the verdict and beyond. This event aims to examine the reasons behind the BJP's victory and analyze the impact of the UP verdict on national politics. Today, we're delighted to have with us the following panelists: Dr. Rahul Verma, Fellow for the Center for Policy Research, India; Dr. Neelam Pandey, Senior Associate Editor for The Print, India; Dr. A.K. Verma, Director for Center for the Study of Society and Politics, India; and Mr. Yogendra Yadav, member of Swaraj India, Swaraj Abhiyan Jai Kisan Andolan. This session is moderated by Dr. Ronojoy Sen, a Senior Research Fellow and Research Lead, Politics, Society and Governance, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS. Before we proceed with it, we would appreciate if you could switch off your microphones and videos throughout the session. The panelists are requested to keep their videos on. If you have any questions or feedback to share during the proceeding, please forward them via the Zoom chat. They'll be consolidated for the panelists to respond during the Q&A session later. Today's session is being live streamed on the ICES Facebook page. I now invite Dr. Sen to make the introductory remarks and chair the discussion. Dr. Sen, please.
Thank you, Kunthavi. A very warm welcome to today's event on the Uttar Pradesh elections and its ramifications. I won't take up much of your time except to give some very brief context to the election results. Of the results to the recently 5 state elections in India, UP perhaps was the most keenly watched. In line with most opinion exit polls, the Bharatiya Janata Party and its allies comfortably returned to power in India's largest and most populous state. The election, as most of you are aware, was largely a bipolar contest between the BJP and the Samajwadi Party, or the SP. The BJP on its own won 255 out of 403 seats in the assembly, which was considerably lower than its tally of 312 in 2017, and 41% of the vote share, which was actually marginally higher than in 2017. The SP won 111 seats and 32% of the vote share, both of which were significantly higher than its 2017 tally of 47 seats and 22% of the vote share. However, that was not enough to bring the SP anywhere close to the majority mark. This was partly due to the collapse of the third political formation in UP, the Bahujan Samaj Party, or the BSP, which won only 1 seat, one less than the Congress, in fact, and 13% of the vote share, compared to 19 seats and 22% of the vote share in 2017. The BSP's decline benefited both the BJP and the SP, but probably did not sufficiently add to the SP's tally to enable it to compete with the BJP. In fact, it is telling statistics that in a proper triangular contest, as was the case in 2012, the SP had won handsomely with only 29% of the vote share. Several reasons have been put forward to explain the BJP's convincing victory. I'll list a few of them. One was the social coalition that the BJP had put together in UP since 2014 and paid off once again. According to the CSTS Lokmiti post-poll survey, and of course we have Yogendra Yadav here, who was one of the founders of Lokmiti, and Dr. Verma, who was one of the early members of the founding members of the Lokmiti group. The BJP won a clear majority, according to the survey, of the other backward classes of the OBCs, except for the others, who are the traditional supporters of the SP. It was a similar story with the scheduled castes, who, with the exception of the Jatavs, who traditionally backed the BSP, voted in large numbers for the BJP. Of the non-Jatav SCs, 41% voted for the BJP coalition compared to 27% for the BSP and 23% for the SP. The SP's alliance with the Rashtriya Lok Dal also possibly failed to bring about the expected consolidation of the Jat Yadav votes. More Jats, it seemed, voted for the BJP than the SP alliance, denting the prospects of the latter in Western UP, where the Jats are concentrated. Second, the welfare schemes of the military government, including direct benefit transfers and free rations, paid electoral dividends. The schemes not only attracted voters from all classes, but also possibly helped the BJP cut across caste divisions to some extent, creating what some have termed a Lavarthi or beneficiary voting bloc. These schemes also seem to have helped the BJP gain more women votes. According to the CSDS survey, the BJP coalition had a lead of 13% over the SP among women, compared to 5% for male voters. This lead low varied by caste and location and was the strongest among upper caste and rural voters. The welfare policies also possibly negated to some extent the economic concerns of voters, including high unemployment and the distress caused by COVID-19. Three, the so-called double-engine Sarkar government where the BJP was in power in both the state and the center seemed to have worked for the BJP. However, according to the CSD survey, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was a bigger draw than Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Adityanath. This once again underlined the importance of Modi in the BJP's electoral campaign. Looking ahead, it might be misleading perhaps to see the BJP's victory in UP as a predictor of the outcome in the 2024 general elections for various reasons. However, it showcased the success of the BJP's policies and its poll campaign in a critical state and the continuing popularity of Prime Minister Modi. The decimation of the Congress in UP and elsewhere, as well as a spectacular victory of the Aam Aadmi Party in Punjab, have also shaken up the opposition's pace in the run-up to the 2024 general elections. To discuss all this and more, we have a stellar panel. I won't be introducing them since they're all well known to you and you also have their bios with you. So first, I'll just turn to Rahul Verma of the Center for Policy Research, as well as the Ashoka University, to dissect some of the headline data and numbers from the election. Over to you, Rahul.
Ranjan, I'm having some trouble with the presentation. Can you proceed with others and I'll find a way to get it?
We'll switch the lineup. Should we just then start with Dr. Verma? Would you be okay starting off? If it's not a problem. You just need to unmute yourself. Yeah, right.
No, it should not be a problem at all.
Right.
Thank you, Ronojoy, for inviting me to this very important and distinguished panel discussion. I remember having come to you 2012 and 2017, and we had a very nice discussion over there post UP elections. This time also, as you very rightly said, the entire world was focused on Uttar Pradesh, though there were 5 states contesting elections. Your brief to me is to discuss the consolidation. I mean, everybody by this time knows very well how the BJP has fared and what has happened in UP. And as a matter of routine, it would have been good if Rahul would have taken up the call first and told about what happened in UP. But I presume that most of the participants are very distinguished and very, learned people, and they know very well what happened in UP. So I would first, I would not go into what happened in UP and presume that everybody knows, and I would straight away go to the consolidation of BJP and the decline of BSP in Uttar Pradesh briefly. Just to briefly, tell everybody that UP has been analyzed traditionally from the lens of caste. And though this may not be a very, convenient tool for me to analyze UP elections from the lens of caste, but I must tell you a couple of things so that we can move on. And one is that the BJP has been able to hold on to all its, support bases in this election. But additionally, as Ranojay was pointing out, Jats, they were hyped to have gone against the BJP. They did go against the BJP a little bit if you look at from the vantage of 2019 parliamentary elections, because in 2019 parliamentary election, the Jat support was very high, about 90%, 91%. This time it has gone to 70%. So from the vantage of 2019, the Jat support was a little down, but from the vantage of 2017, the Jat support to the BJP has doubled. The second very important support which has been credited to the BJP's account is the Jato vote. Mayawati has been getting about 85% of the Jatos vote, and this time about 40% Jatos have switched over to the BJP. So this is a very important shift so far as the consolidation of BJP is concerned in UP. And the third very important shift is about the Pasmanda Muslims. Normally, we have seen that most of the data that we used to analyze earlier, the Muslims were taken as a homogenized group. This time in our Center for the Study of Society and Politics at Kanpur, we try to make a distinction, and we have the Ashraf Muslims versus the Pasmanda Muslims. And we found that the Ashraf Muslim support remains 8% as usual, but the Pasmanda Muslim support has gone up. It has doubled to 16%. So these are the three major accretion to the BJP vote share. And then now coming to my own understanding of the consolidation in UP, I would look to the entire thing from a different perspective. And I think that UP has been experiencing a paradigm shift so far as the entire electoral contestation is concerned. And if you look at the national level and also probably UP level, you will find that there has been a shift from left of the center to the right of the center. This is a very important transition in the Indian electoral contestation right now. And this is because the BJP has been able to, bring to the fore the political centric or you can say ideological contestation vis-a-vis the primordial contestation. Earlier, most of us were interested in caste versus caste and identity politics, etc., etc., and caste dominating politics. It's not that the caste has been completely marginalized, but if you look at closely, you will find that the primordial has been overtaken by the political. That is, the caste has been overtaken by the ideology. And in doing this, I see that the BJP is writing a new grammar of politics, and this is very important to understand that what is that new grammar of politics. So I can see three elements of this new grammar of politics, which Modi and the BJP has been trying to, write for the Indian democracy and Indian elections. And these, I would limit it to three major elements of grammar of politics. And one is that the BJP has been trying to defreeze primordial identities. That is the first thing that they are doing, and transform them into some kind of a class. So from primordial identity, that means the caste identities, they have been going to the class identity. That is the one element of defining thing in grammar of politics. The second is that in doing so, they have been trying to become inclusive from exclusionary politics, which is, founded on the caste politics, identity politics. They have gone to the inclusive politics. And third is, which is very important, that they have transformed identity into aspiration. Because identity, is a limited thing. Identity must have a purpose, and the BJP has capitalized on that and tried to show the subaltern that identity is fine, but identity for what? So these are the three very important elements of grammar of politics that the BJP has tried to write in Uttar Pradesh. And I will take them one by one, because all they have been done under the rubric of governance, development, and security. Now, the first thing is, the first element that the BJP has tried to do is that is, they try to defreeze caste identity. When I remember when Modi took over as the Prime Minister of the country, he was always saying "Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas," and initially people thought that it was a kind of a jumla, and people took it lightly and all. But later on, we could see that it was not a jumla actually. It was operationalized, and the very sophisticated and smart politics that that was made a tool for this operationalization was his Man Ki Baat. You would appreciate that since independence, no prime minister has ever talked to the people of India 86 times. Next Sunday, he would be talking to the people of India 86 times. Every prime minister is a busy person, but every time he makes it a point that he would talk to the people of India once. And when he's talking to the people of India, he's not addressing to any social denomination. He's basically talking to the whole lot of people in Man Ki Baat. And in that, he is not talking politics at all. And this is the most smart politics, not to talk politics when you are meeting the people. So he is getting connected to the people. And this is showing our data that about 9%, 10% people or 11% people say they have voted only because of the Modi factor. So this 10%, 11% voters which have come up in Indian electoral contestation is a very important development, significant development. And this is because he has transcended the caste boundaries and went to the class. And when he is talking about the classes, you will appreciate that he is talking about so many. He's talking about gender, he's talking about farmers, he's talking about poor, Dalit, Vanchit, Soshit, etc., etc. And this cuts across caste lines. So this is something very important that he addressed. And not only that, it's not there is substantive policy formulation so far as the governance is concerned, that most of the policies are gender centric, most of the policies are farmer centric, most of the policies are subaltern centric. You may agree or disagree, that is another thing, but the government is trying to reach out to the class. And that's why you will find that whether it be Ujjwala, whether it be Shauchalaya, whether it be Beti Bachao, whether it be anything, there is a whole lot of policies which are focused on women, similarly on labor, similarly on other sections of the society. And this has been given a reality through the use of modern technology, which we call DBT and other things, which has drastically reduced the corruption, which has drastically reduced middlemen, which has made all the things look very substantive so far as the beneficiaries are concerned. So this is one element of grammar that he's saying. The second thing is that in doing so, he has been completely inclusive. He has not excluded any section of the society, whether it be organization, whether it be government, whether it be leadership. Everywhere you will find that, whether it is ticket allocation or whether it is panchayat or block elections or whether it is the election of the President of India or Vice President of India, you will find that the BJP has tried to, at the national level, create an optics that the inclusiveness is not just a cosmetic thing, but it is a substantive thing. So that is also very important. And this has been brought through the governance through the process of governance, development, and security. Just to give you one example of security, let us talk about the economic security. The Jan Dhan, the DBT is a very important tool of economic security. Would you know that in Uttar Pradesh only, there are 1.5 lakh crore in the Jan Dhan account this January 2022, an account which was opened with the zero balance, and 2.75 lakh crore rupees have been transferred in the Jan Dhan account of the people. So this is something which you and me are not getting, but the poor people of India are getting, and they understand the financial security means what. Then here the government has come through health security, Ayushman cards, 5 lakh rupees insurance, you go to any hospital, and the generic medicines, they are damn cheap about. So all these gives you a sense of health security. Then you have the crop security for farmers, Fasal Bima Yojana, MSP, Kisan Credit Card, Kisan Samman Nidhi. A farmer, forget about the big farmer, but a small farmer, marginal farmer getting 6,000 rupees a year in 3 installments, it does mean to him a lot. For a big farmer, it may be a paltry amount, but for a small farmer who was forced to do suicide, it is something very meaningful. So that is the crop security. And then we have the social security. He is very tough on law and order. He is very tough on women's security. He is very tough on triple talaq. Triple talaq is a very interesting example. The triple talaq may not happen every day and every night, but it was a sword of Damocles hanging on the head of Muslim women, and the greatest sufferer they were, and the greatest insecurity was from their own husbands, to whom they could not share this thing to anybody else. And in our data, 10% more women have voted for the BJP this time, which certainly does not include the Muslim women data. That would have been a little more higher. So this is the second thing, that the government has gone inclusionary. And finally, that we find that the government, the BJP, has also extricated the subalterns from the concept of identity and taken them to aspirations. Because most of the people, they have been always wondering that security is identity is fine, but identity for what? Identity cannot be the ultimate destination. Identity you must have for something. Identity for what? And that identity you wanted for some aspirations, and those aspirations are the empowerment thing. So the government, the BJP has been taking several steps so that the empowerment, thing is demonstrated, whether it be the grassroots level politics or the top level national politics. So these are the three major, things that they have been doing. And just to finish and wind up, that there is a pointer in all this because this has been leading to some sort of a consolidation of the BJP vote share, and you said that it is something very strange for a government, incumbent government, facing a lot of anti-incumbency, a lot of stray cattle issue, a lot of unemployment issue, a lot of price rise issue, and yet the government has not only been able to hold on to its vote share, but it has been also able to make some accretion in its previous vote share. That is something very, very important. So all this has a pointer for a national politics. And when I came to ISIS last time in Singapore 2017, I had made a presentation and said in that presentation that the country is moving towards a BJP system, if you remember. And now I can say very, very convincingly that the BJP system is now slowly moving, and from Congress system once. And the one advantage I will tell you about this BJP system, and I'll not go into the moral aspect of it, whether it is good or bad, but I will tell you one major difference in the BJP system and the Congress system is that while the Congress was credited to be a rainbow coalition, and it had faulted in not getting that rainbow coalition reflected in the leadership structure. That was the major flaw of the Congress. The BJP seems to have learned the lesson, and the BJP is not making that mistake. So mind it, the BJP system stands on a very sound footing. At the moment, there are 18 states in India where 12 states the BJP is ruling on its own, and in 6 states the BJP is ruling on with the help of the allies. So in a state of roughly 30 states, in a union of 30 states, around 18 states, and the center is being dominated by the BJP. And there is a pointer that's what's going to happen 2024, and what going to happen even beyond 2024. So I'll stop at that and let others speak. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Verma, for shedding light on the consolidation of the BJP as well as the BJP system, which you're right that you had mentioned it 5 years ago, and it was incipient then, but we see it very much established now. Of course, we didn't have time to talk about the implosion of the BSP, but we can come back to that during the discussion section. So may I now turn to Rahul? I think he's got his slides and fix to talk a little bit about the data. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Can everybody see this?
We can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. No, so in some ways, thank you, Rananjoy, and thank you, NUS and everyone for inviting me. And it's a great privilege, an honor to be actually sharing the platform with my gurus. Yogendra Yadav trained me in initial election analysis. We were talking about Lokniti being sort of like one of the oldest collaborative or longest running collaborative group of academicians in India. So I was trained under him in 2008, 2009 before heading for my PhD. And Professor A.K. Verma was like someone who I always reached out to understand what's happening, not just in UP politics, but politics in general, and what's happening in the hinterlands of India. So thank you again, everyone, for inviting me. And I think the technical glitch in some ways was a blessing in disguise, because now you already have words and narratives to the data that I'm going to present. So Professor Verma has already laid out a background on what happened in 2022 in UP. So what I'm going to do is basically run you through some numbers, and perhaps both Neelam and then Yogenji can add much more flavor to what was happening on the ground. So this is basically the final election tally of UP by at AC level. What you would see if you compare the 2022 map with 2017 map, of course, there is less saffron, but majority of seats that Samajwadi Party and its allies are winning are in certain pockets. So those pockets are, if you see the green and Samajwadi Party color, that's around the Muzaffarnagar Baghpat belt, where a lots of farmers actually joined the farmers movement. Then you move to the Rohelkhand area, which has a significant chunk of Muslim population. Below, in the belt where Samajwadi Party first family, the Itawa belt, there you will see certain seats the party is winning. And then actually in the eastern UP, Ambedkar Nagar, Azamgarh, and that kind of region. So BJP, which had 312 seats in 2017, and if you break their 2019 vote share into assembly segments, they were leading in 275. This time the numbers came down, but BJP managed to win convincingly. As both Rananjoy and Professor Verma mentioned, while this was Samajwadi Party's best performance, they actually managed to increase their vote share. But given the bipolarity that has entered into the system, which is the entire electoral competition got reduced between the BJP plus and the SP plus, that bipolarity demanded a much higher vote share for the SP to actually take on BJP. In fact, in the run-up to the election, I had run certain simulation models, and I had argued that for Samajwadi Party to win this election, it's actually difficult. And the reason it is difficult, that Samajwadi Party not only needs more vote from non-BJP parties, but there has to be a significant transfer from the BJP's vote base for Samajwadi Party to actually become competitive. So we had run different simulation models, 25% transfer, 50% transfer, and 75% transfer. And these were all being basically done at the 2017 base level. That even when we were thinking about 25, 50, and 70%, 75% transfer from BJP's vote, basically what it was saying, that a large swing of vote was needed in favor of SP for UP politics to actually become competitive. So just to give you an intuition about what this 25, 50, 75 actually means, that if Samajwadi Party, say, gains 1% of vote, 75 or 0.75 should actually come from BJP. Only 25 is coming from non-BJP party, right? So we were basically we were changing the proportion of votes where it is going to come from, and it told, these analysis basically suggested that this election is going to be very, very tough for SP to actually win. They need almost double-digit swing in their favor, and a large part of that has to come from BJP. Something, and this mistake we all made, including myself, some people may have been correct on this. The mistake which we were making in the run-up to the election, that we were thinking that 2017 BJP got 37, 38% vote share, and given they have ruled for 5 years, and both Professor Verma and Rananjoy mentioned about all sorts of issues, stray cattle, economic concerns, COVID, and among other things, this is going to erode BJP's vote share by a couple of points, and election will actually become very, very competitive. But actually, BJP was not contesting at 37%. BJP, when it entered the election, it was entering at 50%. Remember, in 2019, BJP won UP by getting 51% of vote share. In fact, in 2019 election, both SP and BSP had contested in alliance. So what this graph is actually doing, what we have done is, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 7 phases in which the election happened. In each of this, we basically went back to the 2017 and 2019. And so the red dot is BJP's vote share in 2017. The brown dot is BJP's vote share in 2019. And the yellow dot is BJP's vote share in 2022. And what you see, that in all phases, basically BJP's 2022 vote share is between 2017 and 2019. So the bar which BJP managed to raise in 2019 was so high that it was actually very, very difficult to break. So apart from in elections, one thing is very, very important. Election at the end of the day is a game of counting, is a game of numbers. And so the numbers which BJP had in the run-up to election was so high that the Samajwadi Party needed an extraordinary political imagination to challenge BJP. That's what not happened in this election. What SP was doing, as Professor Verma was saying, BJP has managed to craft a new grammar of politics. SP was relying on the old grammar of politics by cobbling an alliance of small caste parties and trying to defeat BJP. They had tried this in 2017 with Congress. They had tried the same thing in 2019 with BSP and RLD. They should have thought something more other than just getting a coalition of smaller parties together. And of course, in this election, what happened? Because the bipolarity developed, both Bahujan Samajwadi Party and the Congress Party, both their vote share collapsed. It got divided between the BJP and the BSP. So elections naturally became more competitive. So margin of victory for 2022 is basically the light blue dot, and it's basically lowest across all phases. But the kind of victory which BJP had, again, coming back to the point of 2019, which is in the dark blue shade, was so high that in each phase, Samajwadi Party needed a much larger swing in its favor to basically challenge BJP. Now, there is all this conversation whether the collapse or the decline of Samajwadi Party actually helped the SP or helped the BJP. Their vote, of course, got transferred to both the parties. So BSP, which was sitting somewhere around 22% in 2017, their vote share got transferred to both the parties. And if you compare these two graphs and the blue line running to it, it's basically a scatter plot. It suggests that SP got a larger share of Bahujan Samaj Party's decline. But given that the Samajwadi Party was starting at such a low base, even the BSP transfer could not help it to overcome the challenge that was thrown by the BJP. And same, this is not basically, the numbers though look different, these are not statistically significant numbers. Basically, in the seats that BJP won, Bahujan Samajwadi Party declined by 10.3%. And in the seats that Samajwadi Party won, Bahujan Samaj Party declined by 9%. So it's not that Bahujan Samaj Party's decline is helping one party or the other. Post results, many have been making this argument again. Had Samajwadi Party and BSP contested together, or there was a greater transfer of BSP votes to the Samajwadi Party, would it have tilted the balance in favor of Samajwadi Party? No, it wouldn't have, because of the gap with which BJP was entering into this election. And just last two slides, which is, there is clear sort of evidence of polarization on the religion axis, not just in the run-up to campaign, where you heard leaders from both the parties, and especially Yogi Adityanath, continue making appeal on the religious axis. These two graphs, the first graph is basically what we did is we added the percentage of Muslims in an assembly constituency and scheduled caste in an assembly constituency. And what you see that in places where the share of these two communities are low, BJP actually starts at 50% vote share. And Samajwadi Party starts at a much lower vote share. Samajwadi Party's vote share declines for a certain period of time, but then it increases, where basically these two communities combined have more than 50% vote share. Actually, Samajwadi Party takes off and BJP declines. But that kind of constituency, a constituency which has more than 50% SC plus Dalit combined, is just less than 10% of UP's assembly constituency. So it does well in the pockets which I showed you on the map, the pockets of Ruhelkhand and certain pockets of East UP. But that's basically the limitation of this kind of mobilization, which is based solely on arithmetic of caste communities. And largely, the effect that you are seeing in graph 1 is coming from graph 2, which is just looking at the Muslim population. So BJP actually does well and is at lead when the Muslim population is around average of 18, 20 or below. It starts declining post 25 or 30% Muslim population. But again, there are only few constituencies that have more than 30, 35% of Muslim population in the state. Finally, just to conclude, and happy to talk about any of the data points I presented here, given the backdrop everyone discussed, this round of elections, especially UP, brings a big sigh of relief for the BJP because there were lots of troubles in the background, the COVID, the economy, and other kinds of concerns. This is basically in the near future, especially in next 6 months, BJP is going to gain more Rajya Sabha seats because of this kind of victory. And it will also have a much easier time in the presidential election, which is scheduled for July this year. They would have anyway got their nominee elected, but now they can actually push whoever they want. The reason, and Professor Verma basically pointed out about the 3 elements of the new grammar, the key question, and we don't have a good answer yet, which is the key reason BJP won, because it has managed to keep its social coalition intact. And something interesting is now unfolding, that a larger share of women are voting for the BJP. And this happened not just in UP, but all 4 states that BJP won. In Goa, in Manipur, in Uttarakhand, BJP had an advantage among women voters. And if you think of the gap which Ronanjay was mentioning, 10% or 13% or 16%, that's a matter of debate. But even if it's in double digit, basically assuming some sort of calculation, half of the gap between SP and BJP is produced just by the gap among women voters. So women are basically putting BJP in a great advantage. And if this trend continues, BJP will have a much easier time winning elections in places where they can mobilize women. The social coalition is intact. And the reason I think is because of 4 factors. There is an ideological glue. So it's a Hindu social coalition, which is maintained by an ethno-political majoritarian idea. There is greater efficiency in delivery of welfare, but that alone is not winning election. There is a charismatic leader sitting on the top, and in some states, so you may not like or not like Yogi Adityanath, but he appeals to the base. And this is basically supported by a very, very powerful organizational machine, both on the ground as well as in the online sphere. And they can basically pass on these messages very, very quickly and very, very effectively. BJP basically dominates in terms of resource control as well as agenda setting. 2 final points. One, and this is just linked, not that we are discussing Punjab, but Punjab, Aam Aadmi Party's victory in Punjab is going to basically help BJP nationally in the short run, because it is going to create more competition for the second spot. And so the effective electoral distance between the BJP and whoever is at the second spot, Congress, AAP, TMC, will increase. So the chances, what Professor Verma was saying, 2024 and beyond, that victory actually helps BJP in the short run. In medium to long run, we don't know. And one effect of this is going to be that Congress must be ready now for more attrition within its rank and file. Finally, just to close, despite all of this victory, even in this data, there are signs of worry for the BJP, and BJP must be cautious on that. One thing which I noticed in the UP data for sure, and this must be present in Uttarakhand and other places, that it's the first time that BJP does not have a huge lead over its competitor among young voters, among students, and among unemployed. BJP used to be the most preferred party among young voters and students, and we know that this is the group which is very, very anxious about this economic prospects in the future. And so BJP can basically do something about this and try to, which is very, very hard, to basically change the course of trajectory on the economy, or basically sit easily because they know that the opposition is not being very, very effective. And in that case, we will have a bigger trouble for Indian democracy, which is you will see these anxieties getting spilled over on the streets. So you will see more civil society and street level mobilizations going forward. So I'll stop here and thank you everyone for patiently listening.
Thank you, Rahul, for analyzing some of the data as well as putting forward some of the larger takeaways. Next, can I turn to Neelam Pandey, senior editor with The Print, to maybe tell us what she gathered from the field during her coverage of the election campaign, and particularly with regard to the popularity of Prime Minister Modi and Chief Minister Adityanath. Please, Neelam.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a privilege to share this platform with such distinguished guests. Well, as you all have already talked about it, how BJP performed in the recently concluded assembly elections, not only increasing its vote share from 2017, but the BJP under Yogi Adityanath has become the first incumbent government since 1985 to retain power. However, rather than getting into any of the technicalities of vote share and the seats, I would like to share my experience of reporting from Uttar Pradesh. And as you pointed out, what I picked up, from people whom I interacted with. Well, voter perception is always an important aspect of politics and elections. Voters also nowadays, this is something that I have encountered, they don't easily divulge their voting preferences or what exactly are they voting for. But as you indulge in long conversations, and if you're able to understand, you're able to then understand what the mahal or the atmosphere is. So you have to give it time. Just going there and collecting bites will not do. One of the most crucial aspects I feel that has emerged from these elections is the fact that, this brand Modi that we talk about, it is definitely intact, and I would say it is larger than the party itself. I covered Uttar Pradesh in terms of PM Modi's Lok Sabha constituency. I visited Ghazipur, Balia, Mau. So a lot of Eastern Uttar Pradesh was part of my travels. And while there were some who criticized the local MLAs and their work, they were always all praised for, PM Modi. How he has improved the country's image internationally, how he is working tirelessly is something that, most women talked about, and how he has been able to deliver despite many challenges. And I believe they were talking about COVID-19 pandemic especially. The Ukraine issue was also mentioned by many, which I was surprised about because I was traveling at the time Ukraine, the issue had surfaced. So the Modi government was rescuing the students, and this is something that, the voters were talking about. As far as my reporting goes, I think, Modi's personal image in the minds of voters is, it remains unblemished. He has no taint of corruption, as Professor Verma and Rahul, they also talked about, the schemes that the government has launched. The removal of the middle person means that people are getting the real benefits of the schemes. And the same goes for Yogi Adityanath, but only to a limited extent. While the opposition harped on Yogi being high-handed, voters actually, I found, like strong leaders, and, they fully supported his bulldozer Baba image, where he's taking action against the mafia or the anti-social elements. I'll give you a small example of Varanasi, which is the Lok Sabha constituency, which is represented by PM Modi. Not only were people full of praise for PM Modi, they also said that he has elevated the stature of the holy city as an MP, something which was not done in the past. So, temple politics is always important and crucial for the Bharatiya Janata Party, whether it is Kashi Vishwanath, Ayodhya, now Mathura, but they know how to reach out to the voter through that temple politics. So I feel that is an important aspect. And I'm just going to quote a resident that I met, Shiv Kumari, who stays in South Varanasi. And she said, and I said that, why do you think, what has changed in Varanasi and what are the issues that you're voting for? And she said, Modi and Yogi ji ne hum pe dhyan diya hai, de rahe hain, to hum bhi denge. So I'll just translate. PM Modi and CM gave us attention, and this is now our turn to return that favor. And then she went on to talk about the transformations she said that Varanasi had witnessed, and right from construction of roads, street lights to better footpaths. She said our Varanasi is becoming better. Another significant thing that she touched upon was the fact that she was getting 500 as widow pension. And she then explained to me that, this money will increase further once the BJP comes to power. So, BJP's nicely packaged welfare politics, I believe, is now paying dividends. Also, BJP knows how to, I would say, for the lack of a better word, advertise their schemes. So, a woman, Shiv Kumari, she's not working, she's a widow. She knows, that she's getting rupees 500 and the scheme, and in future, she might get much more than that. So, it will not be wrong to say, when was the last time people in the streets, they knew the names of government schemes? So be it Ujjwala, Jan Dhan, Swachh Bharat, you name it, and people are talking about it. Free ration, as the other two experts have also pointed out, was one of the major issue that was talked about in these elections. But free ration was provided earlier too. So what has changed now? So what has changed is that Modi government has somehow been able to succeed in cutting off the middlemen, so the delivery is ensured. So also by constantly talking to beneficiary, Modi has advertised his schemes well, whether it is, as Professor Verma said, Man Ki Baat, or as Rahul said, the machinery that is there on ground. They are always able to connect to people and tell them what all has government promised and how they have delivered that. Another important aspect that I want to touch upon is law and order. When I went to Varanasi, Ghazipur, or when I spoke to people from Balia, the common refrain here was that if SP, the Samajwadi Party, if it comes to power, it would mean the return of Gunda Raj. And I would just like to link the Bihar Assembly elections, which I had covered in 2020. There also the BJP, had talked about the tenure of Lalu Prasad Yadav and the Gunda Raj that was witnessed in the state during that period. And this is something that was not only talked about by PM Modi in almost all of his rallies, but the entire focus of Bihar election had shifted to, Gunda Raj versus development, something which we witnessed in Uttar Pradesh elections too. So despite a spirited campaign, by Tejasvi Yadav at that time and by Akhilesh Yadav in the recently concluded assembly elections, law and order became an issue, and Samajwadi Party seemed to have been affected by that. And in any election, when law and order becomes the major narrative, women are bound to react to it. And I'm saying this as a woman also because, safety of women is an important issue, not only for Uttar Pradesh, but for the country. It's a prime concern for India. So the fact that, the BJP made law and order its main pitch, it also tried to show how it had taken stern action against, these antisocial elements, against the mafia, including Mukhtar Ansari. I'll just give you a small example. While addressing a rally in Mau, Yogi Adityanath, he talked about especially what action they had taken and how he will ensure that they do not return to, active politics. At the same time, this entire image of bulldozer Baba, there were many rallies where, bulldozers were, brought to the stage. And, so the image of a protector who is also going to take strict action against antisocial elements, the mafia, is something that I feel got stuck to the people's imagination. And so you are not only talking about an issue, but you're also showing the voters how you're going to tackle it. So that becomes an important aspect of these elections. So as far as Yogi is concerned, he was not, I would say in my at least limited whatever travels, people were talking more about PM Modi than Yogi Adityanath. But those who did talk about him, his image was that of a protector that I came across, and especially the bulldozer Baba image, the moniker he earned in the assembly elections. And so in a way, Yogi Adityanath has also been successful in convincing the people, especially women, that BJP means improved law and order. And the situation on ground also reflected that. This was a subject that was discussed. So a lot of male colleagues, reporters who were also on ground, they said that, we were not able to get these kind of information from women, but because they were not willing to confide in us. A lot of people said that this entire concept of silent voters, gender as emerging as a major category in terms of voters is something that they sort of contested. But I would like to say that, to talk to women in Uttar Pradesh, in rural areas I'm talking about, you really have to first, understand them. You have to really spend time. It is only then that they are willing to talk to you. So it may take time, but I'm sure that, women here but definitely voting as an individual entity and not as a household, something which used to happen earlier. As far as Yogi Adityanath and his image is concerned, I would like to just touch upon one more aspect that he has, as far as the Hindu population is concerned, he's looked upon as a leader who is looking at the interests of the Hindus and at the same time is questioning appeasement, politics. So the third thing, which both the experts have also touched upon, the double engine. So, in Uttarakhand, Goa, Manipur, there also we talked about the double engine sarkar or the double engine government. But it is in Uttar Pradesh that you see double engine in true sense, Modi and Yogi. And, the entire beneficiary politics that I talked about, how the BJP is not letting you forget about their scheme. So as far as Yogi Adityanath is also concerned, he also ensured that his PR, his team, his own, what should I say, the government ensured that people were aware of the work that was being done by the government, and whether there were any lacunas in terms of delivery, they had also promised to look into all those issues. Well, finally, Akhilesh. Well, Akhilesh Yadav, again, I would say that he, as a person, was not talked much about on ground. It is the Samajwadi Party that people were, talking about when talking about their voting preferences. But I would say that, he's a victim of his party's past, because he's trying to change the perception. But somehow, because of the BJP's campaign, this charge of being a Gunda party seemed to have stuck to the Samajwadi Party. And as Akhilesh being the leader, he had to pay a price. But the positive for Akhilesh is that, his party has emerged as the unopposed challenger. At the same time, he has decided to quit his Lok Sabha seat and, be a prime challenge to Yogi in Uttar Pradesh. As far as, of course, there were many caste equations that one has to keep in mind. So, especially when you were talking to voters who were from the Yadav clan, they obviously had a lot to speak about Akhilesh, and they see him as a young leader who can deliver, and a young leader who is trying to change and is actually talking about real issues of unemployment, the stray cattle issue, or how inflation is affecting the people at large, and especially fuel prices. So while the campaign talked about fuel prices, and people I interacted with, they were all aware that the fuel prices were going to increase. So I asked them, so if you know fuel prices are going to increase after the elections, why are you voting for the BJP? And their answer was very simple. They said, no, these things are not governed by governments. This is something internationally it changes. And also for development, for us to encounter development and for us to experience development, we have to be alive. So they were trying to, that entire Hindutva politics was also played into. So I feel that, BJP was not only able to, in a way, weaponize welfare, but at the same time, it was also able to use law and order as its main pitch, which ensured that it got support not only of the women, but a lot of men also talked about the improved law and order situation in the state. I'll end with that.
Okay, thank you, Neelam, for your reports from the ground, so to say. Now it gives me great pleasure to invite Yogendra Yadav, who calls himself a lapsed academic now. He wears several hats these days, but today I request him to take on his earlier avatar of a political analyst and psephologist and look at possibly the bigger picture and the impact of UP election on Indian politics. Please, Yogendra.
Thanks, Ronojoy. I am and continue to be a lapsed academic, and there is simply no way I can get myself to that kind of technical sophistication that you saw in what Rahul presented. That's my Purvajanam and will remain so. And I guess the advantage of, while there are enormous disadvantages of not having your access to raw data, being able to understand the kind of things Varmaji or Rahul can see now, I guess there are some advantages. One advantage is that you see things happening in election as a part of something larger that happens in politics. Election is only an episode in politics. Second is that you don't simply ask people what they say. You also try and think about why is it that they say what they say. And the third, I don't know if it's an advantage, is that you see these things through a certain moral lens. And if that lens seeps through, and if not everyone shares that lens, my apologies. But I don't pretend to be a psephologist. I don't pretend to be a political scientist. I think there are two mistakes that we can make in understanding an election like this. One mistake is what most activists make, which is a plain denial. You know, when I was traveling in Uttar Pradesh, almost every one of my activist friends was absolutely convinced that BJP was about to be trounced. Sweep hai, khatam ho gaye, आंधी hai ye to. And when the results came, most of them refused to believe. EVM hai, badmashi hui hai, this, that, or the other. So that's one mistake, denial, which comes from not being in touch with the ground. And I'm very happy that we have Neelam here, who has actually traveled, because I also got an opportunity to travel this time. I guess it's advantages of being unemployed. So got to travel a bit and saw things with my own eyes. So I felt that most of my activist friends were living in denial. That's one kind of mistake. But we also have the opposite mistake, which is that jo jeeta wahi Sikandar. You know, if you have won, then I start reading back everything into your victory. And I keep saying, all political scientists must watch cricket and must carefully understand cricket commentary, because I've always found cricket commentary to be far more sophisticated than election commentaries. Because in cricket commentary, no commentator ever says that the team that won the match got their batting was good, their bowling was good, their fielding was good, the captain was good. No, I mean, that's bad commentary. And I think a lot of it, so what happens is that we tend to take victors' self-description, we tend to take it as truth. Because every victor wants to tell you why they won. And to my mind, the task of analysis is to begin by saying, trying to understand what the victor got wrong and what the loser got right. Unless we do that, there's hardly any political or electoral commentary here. So with these prefatory remarks, allow me to say some things. I cannot imagine talking about Uttar Pradesh election in 2022 without noting the fact that about a year ago, at least 500,000 or perhaps 1 million people died in this state due to a pandemic in which people did not have access to oxygen, people did not have access to public health, not even decent cremation grounds. Corpses were floating. If BJP had lost this election, everyone would have jumped and said, what do you expect? You know, didn't you notice those Ganga mein laash tair rahi thi? Didn't you notice this? So, but now that BJP has won, should we just forget it? I think the starting point, and that's why I think it's important not to take victors' autobiographies too seriously. Everyone who wins a war writes an autobiography. And a serious history begins when you discard that autobiography, when you actually try and understand. To my mind, the important thing is to begin by noting that here we have a fairly indifferent government. Punjab had a fairly incompetent and indifferent government that was very badly punished, deservedly punished. Uttar Pradesh, notwithstanding the election results, was a fairly indifferent government. The trouble is, if we start reading election results back into the performance of the government, that would be a very, very strange analysis. The whole point is to notice this paradox. To my mind, analysis begins when we notice a contradiction or paradox. And the paradox is this. Here we have a fairly indifferent government, which manages to come back in a spectacular way. So then you have noticed a contradiction. And my professors used to tell me in classes on political theory that it is when you notice an apparent contradiction that you begin your interpretation. So this apparent contradiction should be the beginning of a serious interpretation as to why is it in a state where unemployment is very high, much higher than recorded. People were truly upset with inflation, although inflation officially was not that high, where stray cattle menace was very high. Agriculture was not doing bad, not doing very well. We don't have to be political scientists. We can just look at the economic facts of the state. Why is it that a state like this witnesses a victory of this kind? To my mind, therefore, that should be the starting point. This is a question I would like political scientists to address. As an activist, I can only contribute to the question. My contribution to the answer may not be that good because I don't have access to your kind of tools and data anymore. But here is my rough answer. I think my colleagues are absolutely right in saying that we have a new grammar or a new paradigm of politics that has come in. Something like this was impossible if we did not have a new paradigm of politics. What are the constituents of this paradigm is what we may have some disagreement about. To my mind, the starting point of that paradigm is exclusion, not inclusion. It is a firm exclusion of Muslims from being even citizens, even equal level citizens of the state. That is where the whole game begins. I was absolutely astounded that my old friend Anilji did not even mention this fact. How can you possibly analyze Uttar Pradesh without noticing the fact that the chief minister opens the campaign by talking about 80-20? What was he talking about? What is this 80-20? Do we not hear the kind of speeches? After some point, I could not hear those speeches. Many of those speeches did not make it to national media. And Election Commission, of course, slept through all those things. There was a visceral hatred campaign against the Muslims, which was unleashed much before the election, which continued through elections, continued in the election speeches, supported and patronized by the Prime Minister himself. That is one element. Anyone who says that is the only element, that would be completely wrong. That is one element of so exclusion of Muslim and creating this we-they. That's critical to the whole. That's step one. Step two is, as I think Rahul has correctly noted, a social coalition. We cannot say that when 75% Yadavs vote for Samajwadi Party, that is primordial, and when 75% upper caste vote for BJP, that is ideology. I think that would be a strange understanding of primordiality. Unless we believe that only certain castes are prone to primordial behavior and other human beings are above that. So BJP has a social bloc. BJP retains that social bloc, which is the Just as Samajwadi Party has a known social bloc, BJP has a known social bloc, which is as much based on primordiality. It is just that upper caste have a certain chaste Hindi to cover their primordiality. And sometimes the backward caste do not have anything except a danda to cover their primordiality. Both of them are primordial, pretty much so. In Uttar Pradesh, if you know you're speaking to someone from the upper caste, you know what they would say. And if you walk into a Yadav village, before speaking to someone, you know what they would say. I place both of them at par. So yes, there is a social coalition. BJP retains it. BJP deepens it by getting a more than proportionate share from the losses of the BSP. I would request Rahul to please check his conclusions once again, because I think he's basing it on aggregate data analysis. I think it's best to go back to survey data analysis, because then we have unit level data and we are unlikely to make ecological fallacy. Sorry, I'm slipping back into my old psephological self. But anyway, I think someone needs to just check that. I think my own impression is that BJP gained disproportionately more from the losses of BSP than the SP. And it stands to reason that local, because much of the atrocities against Dalits have been by the OBCs. So it is harder for Dalits to get themselves to vote for Samajwadi Party. So there's a consolidation of social bloc. The point about women, I think, is absolutely vital in this entire thing. BJP, that as I think Neelam noted and also Rahul noted, this is an absolutely critical piece to BJP's social bloc. There is a new factor, which is a disproportionate support among the women. And that is connected to both the things that BJP emphasized. BJP knew that that there are two things that they could play up. One is the ration delivery, second is law and order. And both of these actually attracted women more than men. And you had the desired effect. So that, to my mind, is the second factor: new social, consolidation of social bloc with women, addition of women to that. Third is not just, the Labharthi narrative is correct, but is right and wrong. Yes, of course, the government schemes were there. But from many of the analysts in the last 10 days, it appears to me that it is for the first time that government had started announcing schemes in Uttar Pradesh. To my mind, that's been happening for the last 70 years. And someone who knows better economics would need to find out whether the level of government schemes delivery was better in the last 5 years compared to the previous 50, 60 years. To my mind, what was better was not the scheme. It is the political connect of the scheme, the connection of the scheme to the political party which is delivering it. The only place where I saw that in the past was West Bengal during the left front regime, where whatever you got, even if the scheme was coming from the central government, it was given to you by the CPM, and you were made sure that you remembered that CPM, the party, was giving it to you. That model was being replicated here. So every ration bag has a picture. Every Labharthi has a phone number on which they get a call. Everyone is reminded about the scheme names, and the point about scheme names was so apt. So what is new here is, so actually the metaphor of Labharthi should be turned upside down. It is BJP which is the Labharthi. The government schemes have been happening for the last so many years. This time it was, the only two differences was that in some cases there was a direct, the proportion of direct transfer has increased over the years. But more than direct transfer, it is the direct political transfer. That is to say, connecting every transfer to the party which is doing it. That made a difference. And finally, the fourth element in this, and I wish we talk about it more openly, frankly, it is communication. I think more than anything else, BJP is the only 21st century communication machine in the country today. The level of communication is astounding. It is dreadful, it is heinous, it is marvelous at the same time. The level to which you can spread falsity, rumors, every single BJP supporter, every single BJP booth level worker has data up their sleeves. They can simply tell you, हाँ, यूक्रेन से ये हुआ, पेट्रोल का प्राइस तो साहब लैटिन अमेरिका में भी बहुत है, आपको पता नहीं है. Everyone has, whether these facts are true or false makes no difference, but they command these things. And every SP voter has nothing but a set of, or SP worker. An average SP worker does not even know what his party has promised in the election manifesto. A BJP worker not only knows all the things. So it's astonishing machine of communication. The old word for this used to be propaganda. I think it is an astonishing level of communication of the kind that this country has never witnessed. I do not know if Putin commands this kind of a communication machine. I don't know if any country had witnessed it, where voters are giving you alibi for political parties. So you ask the voter, Chutta Janwar ki problem, they give you a 5-minute lecture on how bad the situation is. Then you ask them, oh, who are you going to vote for? Of course, BJP. Then you said, but you were talking about the Chutta Janwar. The voter would tell you, अरे छुट्टे जानवर का मोदी जी से क्या मतलब, योगी जी से क्या मतलब, ये तो हम ही छोड़ रहे हैं ना. So voter is offering alibi for incompetence of governments. When that happens, you're speaking of something extraordinary. I think this needs to, this propaganda machine and its success. If as political scientists, we were simply to start collecting consequences after the propaganda machine has done its work, and we start gathering it as truth. I mean, it is true that in some ways, public opinion is truth, because that is the operational truth that matters in voting. But if as political scientists, we were to actually start believing that this is truth, I think this would be a death of understanding of politics. So it's that communication, masterly communication machine that we must understand. As a result, everyone in Uttar Pradesh remembers how bad law and order was during Samajwadi Party times. No one remembers how many people Mr. Yogi got killed during the so-called encounters. No one talks about the Thakur Raj that happened in so many of the thanas. So I'm not saying this is, I mean, of course it is true that there was Gunda Raj during, I mean, there was a certain element of Gunda Raj during Akhilesh's regime, but one could be played up, the other could be concealed. That is politics. That is what decides elections. Finally, implications. I do not think 2024 is a done deal. I think once again, we should not take the victor's victory speech too seriously. These speeches are meant to enthuse their workers. They should not enthuse political scientists. It is not a done deal. And the emergence of a bipolar system is actually a threat to the BJP. Because as long as it was a triangular contest with BJP having an advantage of about 10 percentage points or more, the situation was more secure for the BJP. Now that it has become a truly bipolar contest, and if Samajwadi Party could wean away voters who are at the edge of BJP's social alliance, and of course do not do only social arithmetic, but actually do some communication on the ground, which they did not do. It could be a closer election than we imagine it to be. But yes, there is no doubt that the road to 2024 is tougher, that the psychological setback that the BJP has received in West Bengal has been more or less wiped out because of this victory of the BJP. They start on a position of strength. But as I said, as a student of politics and as an activist, I cannot simply analyze this is not stock market. I cannot just do stock market analysis and say this company has gained this much share, this much billions of advantage. I do think about this country where I'm born, a country that I love, and a country that I worry about. Whether it is political science or not, I care two hoots about it. I care about this country that I live. A country where you have a very dangerous rise of majoritarianism, an unapologetic, aggressive majoritarianism backed by media power, money power, which practically makes democracy a joke. What we have is dismantling of our republic. When I said it, people got extremely annoyed because somehow, at least on television channels, the religion is that when people vote, they must be right. People vote for good reasons. People are not idiots. But the consequences of what they do can be dreadful. If this was not the case, we should all be applauding Mr. Putin. We should all be applauding Mr. Erdogan. We should be in love with Mr. Whoever is the president in Sri Lanka, Hungary. I mean, the fact is we know there is something called the dark side of democracy. That electoral victories, fair electoral victories, can produce consequences which undermine democracy. I fear Uttar Pradesh election is one more step in that direction. And as Indian, the challenge of saving this republic and our democracy has become that much more difficult. But the difficult things are worth doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Yogendra, for putting forth some propagative propositions. And before now, we've got some questions coming in. But before I turn to the audience questions, Professor Verma, do you want to quickly respond to the question of exclusion versus inclusion? And I'll also maybe give Neelam and Rahul the opportunity to respond to maybe certain aspects of what Yogendra said. Yeah, please, Dr. Verma, go ahead.
This is always a contested, issue, exclusion. And it very much depends upon the lens you are wearing to analyze this concept of exclusion. We are not, the spokesmen of any political party to defend or fall in line. But I was hearing to Yogi on the television, and some anchor asked him this question, that what is this business of 80 and 20, what you are saying? What he said, I am reporting. He said, I am saying 80-20 because it was exactly 80% seats that we got in 2017. And it was exactly 80% of seats that we got in parliamentary election. So I'm reporting what he said, notwithstanding his diversion of what he said. Well, exclusion has to be examined from a historical angle. And there is a narrative in the country which has consistently tried to have a lopsided view of exclusion. And the entire genesis of Bharatiya Janata Party, we all know, is based on Hindutva. And when learned persons in India, commentators, scholars, they talk of exclusion, then many people wonder why they take a lopsided view of exclusion. Why do they not talk of exclusion when Kashmir happened? Nobody raised any voice. When you have one or two persons suffering some violence, then there is a lot of hue and cry, whether it is media or scholars. But nobody talks of when Mamata Banerjee post-election kills or abets in the killing of a lot of people, or people are burned in West Bengal. It doesn't become a media narrative. So exclusion, nobody is going to, defend, and it should not be defended, should be condemned. But the kind of exclusion which is alleged to the BJP, I am sure the people who allege BJP of exclusion, they have some questions to ask, and people don't buy their argument of exclusion and their logic of exclusion, because it doesn't seem to be equal, balanced on both the sides. Because lakhs and lakhs of people, majoritarianism, we talk of majoritarianism, but you forget about majoritarianism in Kashmir. Oof, you forget of violence in Kashmir. So exclusion we have to condemn, but we have to be balanced. That is one. The second thing is that because of the historical reasons and because of the logic of BJP and RSS, it is difficult for BJP to have Muslims as candidates. And that's an exclusion which they try to compensate through Apna Dal and Rampur, etc. But the very fact that they are expecting Muslims only one thing, and which I think is quite genuine, and that is just to be taking the sides of the country. There are many instances which are greatly underplayed in media or narratives, but at the grassroots level, especially now, even if people have started wondering whether it is good to call a community minority where they are almost 50% in some pockets, and what is happening to the other communities over there who are virtually minority in those pockets. So the entire minority, majority, exclusion, inclusion is a very confused scenario in the country. And obviously, as Yogesh ji, given the fact that we had worked 20 years with them and learned a lot, in fact, the suggestion that analysts should seriously ponder over all these questions. But my pointer would only be that BJP understands that it has to be inclusive, and that they are trying actually. And that is the reason as I indicated, that the Pasmanda Muslims have been drawn to their fold, and about 18% Pasmanda Muslims, as compared to Ashraf Muslims, they have voted for BJP. So on their own, they are also trying, and the very fact that their basic approach is that every political party's basic approach is that they want to have a winning candidate, and certainly BJP cannot have a winning candidate, Muslim candidate at the moment. So all those things are, in a churning state at the moment. BJP realizing very well that they have to move on, and they have to be inclusive so far as the Muslims are also concerned. But I think it will take some time before actually there is some kind of, accommodation of the Muslims in the BJP as a political party.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Verma. Rahul and Nilam, do you have any quick? We're running sort of out of time.
Just
quick intervention
one quick intervention. I'm trained well by Yogenji, even like think elections from the cricket perspective. But just to on his point on BSP vote, and of course it's an ecological inference problem because we are looking at aggregate data. But I don't think survey data is going to tell us anything different, and the reason is this, Yogenji. This time the survey basically tells that BSP's vote among Muslims is lower than even the BJP, which means that the decline of BSP from 22 to 12 is happening because of a larger section of so Muslim vote basically shifting towards the SP. The Jata vote still remains with the BSP, and the non-Jata vote had already shifted towards BJP in 2017. So I don't think we are going to get anything different. And this is also to add to your point on bipolarization, and I don't have a good answer. But I think what's happening, and look, this happened in Assam, Bihar 2020, Assam 2021, Bengal, and now UP. In a place with significant Muslim population and BJP being a formidable player, we are going to see a process of consolidation and counter-consolidation on religion axis. This is going to create a glass ceiling for BJP in Bengal and for a Samajwadi Party and RJD in UP and Bihar. So bipolarity in that sense is going to put BJP in advantage in certain position if the axis remains religion in UP and Bihar, but it will put them at disadvantage in Bengal and perhaps in Assam later.
Right, Neelam, very quickly.
I'll just add one point. Mr. Yadav talked about beneficiary politics and how free ration was provided earlier. Also, what is it that has been different? So I do agree to some extent that, but Modi government has been successful in advertising, but at the same time implementing this scheme. So if you talk about Jan Dhan, or you talk about Ujjwala scheme, or you talk about Jal Se Nal, they've already reached their target of 47%. So on ground, this is visible, and people are also responding to that. Apart from the fact that the BJP has been able to advertise their schemes, they don't let you forget about their schemes. I agree with that. So in a way, you could call it weaponizing welfare, but at the same time, it is reaching the people.
Right. I think we are almost out of time, but just the couple of questions that came in first. One was on the, I think you could read it, on the law and order situation and how events like Election Kurkeri did not really damage the BJP's prospects, as well as the larger impact of the farmers' movement in Western and Central UP. And again, these sort of hotspots of Unnao, Election Kurkeri, etc. So, Yogendra, do you want to give a quick response as to why this might not have had an impact?
I think because the expectation of the impact were exaggerated. You see, the fact is that if you divide farmers' movement areas into areas of very intense mobilization, now much of the mobilization that happened on Ghazipur border in Delhi came from Muzaffarnagar, Meerut, Shamli, and Bagpat. These 4 districts have 19 seats, and I'm told BJP has lost 12 of them. And of the 7 seats they have won, 3 are purely urban: Meerut Cantonment, and Muzaffarnagar. So, but apart from that, if you look at even if you look at the charts, as I think Rahul had pointed out, there is a substantial shift away. What has not happened is a dramatic one-way swing, which is what activists were imagining might happen. And the reason it has not happened is, I think, twofold. One is that the impact of Muzaffarnagar riots has been significantly reduced, but not erased altogether. In that entire area, there was a strong communal underlying element which prevailed. Second is that the farming communities where the mobilization took place, among them BJP now has a deep penetration in all the Western UP villages where I traveled during the elections. There was not one village where there were at least not 1 or 2 significant Jat families who were firmly with the BJP. So BJP has established deep connects now and therefore, in the areas of concentration of farmer movement mobilization, they suffered somewhat, but they did not suffer beyond a point. It so happens that the Jat areas and Yadav areas are somewhat different in Uttar Pradesh. So you don't have an area where you have Yadav and Jat and Muslims. Because of this geographical situation, everywhere the social coalition that the Samajwadi Party could put together was always a coalition of minority, except in tiny places in the Rohilkhand, where Yadavs and Muslims are sociologically very large. Farmers' movement impact in this concentrated belt was there. Otherwise, BJP would not have suffered anything. The fact that the belt that Rahul showed right in the beginning is precisely the farmers' movement belt. So there was an impact. The impact was not decisive. The impact was not something which could, in overall terms, change the outcome altogether. So on television debates, you could say there was no impact because sufficient seats were not, because Uttar Pradesh overall election results were not changed. To my mind, that expectation was a false expectation. That's what I used to tell my farmer friends while we were doing the campaign against the BJP. The fact is that those who are directly and outside this main area of farmers' movement mobilization, and all these things you can confirm with survey evidence, because CSDS Lokniti survey actually asked lots of questions about farmer movement. From all those questions, because fortunately there is no space for these things in television debates, but we can discuss it here. On every single question related to farmers' movement, you can see that the public opinion is tilted in favor of the farmers' movement, not only in the concentration areas, but also outside that. The trouble is that not all that converts into votes, and the element that converts into vote does not lead to shifting of seats. So if we have a graded approach to understanding the impact of certain things, then we would understand that there was an impact. The impact was not sufficient. On television debate, they picked up Lakhimpur Kheri, that in Lakhimpur Kheri district, all the seats were won by BJP. Now, that doesn't even look at the composition of Lakhimpur Kheri. In Lakhimpur Kheri, there was no big farmers movement in Lakhimpur Kheri. There was this heinous incident that happened there, which brought national attention. But that does not make it an area of concentration of farmers movement. Most of the farmers protesting in Lakhimpur Kheri were Punjabis and Sikhs, who do not constitute even 2% of the population there. So no one should have expected any major changes in Lakhimpur Kheri. So that's my broad understanding, that if someone were to do a graded impact analysis, you would say that there was an impact, not significant, not large enough to be able to switch seats, at least in the entire state.
Can I just add to the farm movement issue? I also feel that, the UP government's success in reducing the payment of arrears to sugarcane farmers and increasing the minimum price, that also sort of took some of the wind out of the sails of the farm movement. I had also traveled to Lakhimpur Kheri when the incident had happened. So one of the prime concerns of the farmers was the arrears that they had not been paid.
Right. So thanks. So in the interest of time, I won't take the earlier question to the other panelists. And we run out of time, but very quickly, maybe we can just get a sort of minute each response from all of you. There is a question on whether caste-based arithmetic, or basically the question of using caste is a sterile way of analyzing election results. Of course, this applies not just for UP but elsewhere. I know this we could have spent another hour discussing this, but could I just go around the room quickly and just get your very quick responses? So, Dr. Verma, do you want to start? We have very little time, so
Well, caste has been traditionally used as a tool of analysis, and still many analysts and scholars and media people, they still try to look the elections entire from the perspective of caste. But my take is that caste continues to be an important factor, but certainly there is a transition from caste to class. Now people are more interested in looking at the advantage part. After all, why you want to vote a caste party? That is an important question. You wanted an identity for yourself. Now that identity has now been taken care of. Now, what do you do with that identity? So people are now, they want to move beyond caste. They want to move beyond identity. And that's why, as you will see, 14% Yadav, 18% Yadavs have voted BJP. As you see, 40% Jatavs have voted BJP. As you can see, 19% Ashraf Muslim, Pasmanda Muslims have voted BJP. So many other castes, there is a churning, that fixity is there. The freezing of caste identity is taking place in UP. And I understand that it is the class orientation. Now we talk of farmers, we talk of women, we talk of youth, we talk of subaltern, we talk of poor. So there are people who may disagree, but the churning is taking place at the grassroots level, and the caste identities are gradually diluting. I'm not saying that it's completely gone away, but people are now more inclined to think not only on caste lines, but also on other lines, especially class lines.
Right. Rahul, quick.
So the question is interesting. It comes very often in election analysis, and it also has a normative value when this question always gets asked. See, social divisions in any part of the world is going to be reflected in politics. Parties, after all, are rooted in social cleavages of the society. So even if you're doing analysis of American elections, which to some will seem a modern society, people do analyze election voting behavior by how African Americans are voting, how suburban whites are voting, how Hispanics are voting. So inherent in this question is, if you look caste analysis, it's basically very bad way of analyzing politics. So my first point is, you will always see social divisions reflected in politics, and that is always going to happen. The problem is the way we basically analyze and tell how caste operates in politics. It seems everyone basically talks of caste as very deterministic, that because I was born in a certain caste, I'm always going to vote for a particular kind of a party or for a particular kind of issue. And that's problematic. So I'll let Yoginji and Neelam add to this point.
Right. Neelam, any quick thoughts on the question?
As as Rahul said, this is a question that is always asked, but I feel caste is a major component of elections, Indian elections, and I feel it will continue to be an important factor in the days to come. But at the same time, as Professor Verma said, there is a churning, and for me, that churning is welfare politics that the BJP especially is indulging in. Not only BJP, southern states also, they are indulging in welfare politics. So that is going to definitely bring up some change in caste politics, but to say that people will not vote on the basis of caste is a bit premature. At the same time, till we have, as Rahul also said, social divisions in the society, caste politics will remain, but the degree may vary.
Right. And the final words of wisdom from Yogendra. I know you've written on this question before and how it's sometimes over-emphasized. Yeah, please.
Caste is a necessary but not sufficient way of understanding and explaining politics. Caste explains the building blocks of voting, but it does not explain the shifts that take place across elections. So why Samajwadi Party in the worst of elections will get 60% Yadav vote and in the best 80% is explained by caste. But why in one election it gets only 60 and in another 80 is not explained by caste. And the operational change is that in an election, in a good election for a political party, they gain votes across caste and communities, which is what explains the shift. The shift in votes between two elections are not normally caste-based. The shift is across caste. They have different levels to begin with, but the shift is cutting across caste lines. And therefore, we must look for factors other than caste as operational explanations of why election results change the way they do. Women are an important factor. That must be understood very clearly. The point about youth I had missed, but that looks like an important thing to be looked at. I would wish to believe that Uttar Pradesh is moving from caste to class. But when I travel in a village and enter a village and sit in a panchayat, the day I can say that, well, their caste does not make any difference to their opinions, that day I will start, supporting my friend Vermaji. I think that day is a few decades away.
Right. Okay. On that note, we have to conclude today's session. We've run beyond our allotted time. Thank you once again to all the speakers for giving their precious time to this event, and thank you for the audience for by and large sticking around from the beginning. On that note, goodbye and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Ronojoy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.